Good evening. This is Chairperson Polly. Welcome to the Sacramento County Planning Commission for April 27th. Before we begin the meeting, I do have an announcement to read. In compliance with directives of the county, state, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, public meetings will be temporarily closed to the public. Meeting procedures are subject to change pursuant to guidelines related to social distancing and minimizing person-to-person contact. Members of the public are encouraged to submit public comments electronically. Public comments may be related to a specific agenda item, number, or for a matter that is not posted on the agenda, referred to as an off-agenda item. Public comments will be included in the meeting record. How to make an electronic public comment. Email boardclerk@saccounty.net. Include the meeting date and agenda item number. Adding a first and last name or contact information is optional. If you're online, go to bospublicmeetings.saccounty.net. Click on Make a Comment electronically. Could you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Martinson?
Here.
Commissioner Poley?
Present.
Commissioner Hom?
Here.
Commissioner Tatishi?
Present.
Commissioner Shelby?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Could we begin with the first item, please?
Chairperson Poley, I'd like to administer the oath.
Yes.
At the beginning, if there are any applicants who plan to speak, we could just do it all at one time. And
so since we can't see who is wanting to take the oath, do we simply administer the oath and then ask people to verbally agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would you please do that?
Yes. The appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do you so affirm? When you speak, please state your name for the record and the statement, I have been sworn.
Okay.
Item number 1, PLER 2019-00129, 2030 General Plan Annual Report for calendar year 2019.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Todd Smith. I am standing in for John Lundgren this evening. John is normally the one who presents this to you. But he's been out working in the county's Emergency Operations Center dealing with this COVID-19 crisis. So first, before I formally begin, I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
I can hear you. Yes, Alan is yes.
And we can now see your screen. We can see your presentation.
Excellent. So we will just move on to slide 2, please. Once that's up, and there we go. So this is the 2030 General Plan Annual Report. Those of you who've been on the commission, well, I think all of you have seen this before. We do it every year. Normally we do this in March because this report is due to the State Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st, but due to the COVID-19 crisis, we had to delay this. So I'm going to just report on what we've been doing in the general plan world over the last year, starting with these major projects and programs. in 2019. So starting with housing element implementation, we have continued working on programs that are now in the 7th year of the planning period, and we are ongoing tracking of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA. We completed phase 2 of the environmental justice element that involved some additional outreach last year, and it was formally adopted by the board in December of 2019. And staff are now following up on the implementation, and we're learning as we go, as we're trying to do outreach in this new environment, given that we can't meet face-to-face right now. Fortunately, it's prompting us to think in an innovative fashion and look at alternative platforms for outreach. So it's a work in progress, but we are making it work. Moving on to the South Sacramento Habitat Conservation Plan. The county obtained all the necessary permits to allow the individual projects to move forward through some expedited permitting via the state and federal agencies related to endangered species. That was done, it was formally adopted in 2019, but all this work is ongoing in 2018, lots of work going on in 2019. We actually created formally the South Sacramento Conservation Agency. We hired a new executive director, formed an agency board, and set up some formal committees to deal with technical details as we get going. And just so you know, commissioners, planning staff are responsible for issuance of permits now at the local level, which should hopefully streamline some timelines. And then finally, in most of 2019, the community-wide climate action plan, or CAP, has been on hold while we've been tracking some litigation in other jurisdictions, and I'll have some more on that later on that important point. And if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so moving on into the details of the housing element implementation. I'm going to talk to you briefly about a couple of the programs we have. First one, well, before that, excuse me, housing legislation tracking. You remember a couple years ago, 2017, we had a pretty big year with housing legislation. 2019 was no different. We've got a number of new pieces of legislation that were signed into law. We're changing our practices to respond to those. Specifically, skipping ahead to the programs now, the monitoring of vacant multifamily parcels. We have a lot of work to do there as we review parcels on a site-by-site basis. And then accessory dwelling units, or ADUs as we call them. This was a big year for those. We actually started an urgency ordinance to put into practice what we're doing as far as implementation, consistent with that new state legislation. And then moving on to the housing element update, we began work this year on the formal update to the element. It's on an 8-year cycle. We also began work on a planning grant through SB2, which it's the first year planning grant that will include a countywide rezone program to some sites. And it also will bring about other changes in the county's zoning code and potentially a design review program that would further streamline housing reviews. So we're hoping to wrap that up in the next 12 to 18 months, all those components of the SB2 first year funds. Next slide, please. I don't see the next slide advancing on my side, but perhaps it has for others.
We are seeing slide number 4, regional housing needs allocation. Now,
Thank you.
now back to slide number 3. So looks like we need to go back up to slide number 4.
Yes, please. Slide number 4.
There we go.
All right, so this slide just shows our progress towards meeting the regional housing needs allocation. Sacramento County is not alone in finding that the private sector, which includes nonprofit and for-profit affordable builders with subsidies, together the construction has not met the county's goals for the RHNA progress. This chart is just for information's sake. You can see where the units, in which income categories those units are produced. There they are on my side. So we've got a pretty significant number remaining, and at this point in the 8-year process, that is cause for concern for us. But like I said, Sacramento County is not alone in that status. And we can move to the next slide. Can everybody see slide 5? I'm still seeing slide 4 on my end.
Yes, I'm seeing slide 5.
Okay. Slide 5 is, let's see. Okay, now it's seeing on my end too. So slide 5 is a comparison. So we're looking at cycle 5, which is 2013 to 2021. It's the 8-year period of our current housing element, and comparison to cycle 6, which is the next 8-year cycle for the regional housing needs allocation. You'll see a pretty significant increase, 53.6% between the two cycles, and that is roughly an increase of 2,659 units per year on average. And just by way of comparison, in the previous slide, we don't need to go back to it, but over the 7-year period that we're in right now, we're averaging about 625 units per year. So there's a big disconnect, essentially, between what the regional housing needs allocation is allocated to Sacramento County and other jurisdictions in terms of what they're able to produce on an annual basis versus what the formula gives to each jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you may recall from last year, we are doing a deeper dive on individual elements on an annual basis. The written report that's in your package provides information in a much greater level of detail, specific policies and implementation measures. This slide just shows the number of implementation measures that are either complete or have some progress or no progress on the conservation element, the land use element, and the safety element. So this is just a quick snapshot. And some of these, I want to point out, some of these that are shown as some progress, just for information's sake, you should be aware that some of the policies and implementation measures that are in our general plan are ongoing. There's no clear task that could be completed that says, we have done this, we've met our mark. They're done on an ongoing basis. So some of those will stay in some progress. Next slide, please. Okay, so slide 7 is all about growth, and how Sacramento County deals with it. So, and this will tie into the RENA projections that were in our previous slides. So the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG, projects growth in roughly 37,000 units by 2040, which is the end year of the current Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. And that is projected growth between 2020 and 2040, which is an average of about 1,860 units per year. Now, remember, I just said a few minutes ago that we averaged about 625 units per year over the last 7 years. So that's about triple the number that we've averaged over the last 7 years, and that would have to occur over the next 20 years. So I'm just throwing a bunch of numbers at you, but you can see how some of these projections are just that. They may or may not be completely accurate or achievable. So the Sacramento County General Plan has a couple of different growth strategies. One of those is infill. And in the general plan, we have identified vacant or underutilized properties, and there's an assumption in our general plan for new units on those properties, and in about 15 what we call commercial corridors, and those are between the two of those, 10 to 18,000 units on vacant or underutilized property, then commercial corridors about 19,000 units. By way of information, we do have this project in progress that's called the Re-Envision West Arden Arcade Plan, where our office is partnering with the county's Department of Transportation on a Caltrans Sustainable Communities grant. This is one that we were able to, we were awarded because of primarily the fact that we did have the environmental justice element completed in a timely manner, and that gave us bonus points in competing for this grant. So we're that's an example of the infill type of growth that we're working on. And the next two slides, we can go ahead to the next one. Next slide, slide 8. I'm going to talk about the approved growth areas and pending master plans. So slide 8, we've got, I believe it's the approved growth areas, and it represents a little bit over 50,000 units that would add within the next, I don't know, 10 or so years, depending on how quickly the market can absorb them. You'll see on this slide all of these were approved plans when we did this last year, with the exception of Mather South. That was approved by the Board of Supervisors in January this year, so it adds to what are the list of approved growth areas in the county. With Rancho Murrieta at the bottom there, the number is just over 50,500 units. So if we add that to the infill, we're up over 80 to 85,000 units. If you're taking notes and comparing to what our RENA allocation is. And then the next slide, please, is master plans. So these 5 pending master plans, 3 of them along the Jackson Highway corridor and 2 in Natomas. We've got about 61,000 units between all 5 of those. So we've got a great deal of planning activity going on. We're trying to make it as attractive as possible, recognizing that in the South Sac HCP plan area, there's some streamlining and potential for potentially more rapid growth there, but that all depends on the market. Moving on to slide 10, please. I want to talk briefly about our 2020 through 2021 priorities for the long-range planning team in general plan implementation. So I already mentioned the West Arden Arcade project, Re-Envision West Arden Arcade. That's ongoing. We are continuing to do work on environmental justice implementation. Some of that is done behind the scenes through education, discussions with other departments, how we can inform different departments' decision through the policies that were adopted through EJ. We've got the housing element that is a big lift for us this year and early next year to try to get the housing element update through the outreach process and some decisions made so we can have a housing element that can be certified by the state. And then the last that I skipped over, the county community-wide climate action plan. I mentioned earlier that this was on hold for a significant part of 2019. This work has become a priority for the county this year. We are looking at some more focused outreach with a couple of key stakeholders, including the Environmental Council of Sacramento, or ECOS, and 350 Sacramento, and the local chapter of the Sierra Club. We've had some conversations with those folks about some ideas that they have. We're also bringing in a couple of key members of the business community and the development community to try to have some focused discussions and decision points to finish the countywide climate action plan within the next 12 to 18 months. That is a long, it's an outstanding commitment that we made in the general plan update, and we're trying to bring it home this year. So I think that's all I have. Oh, I forgot to mention, excuse me, the Housing Trust Fund Nexus Study and Ordinance Update. That's another piece that you may not hear much about, but on a regular basis. But we do have a Housing Trust Fund that is for fees for non-residential development. That fee hasn't been updated since the early 90s. So we think it's the time is right to update that. We have to go through a nexus study process and update the ordinance. And with that, I have my recommendation on the next slide, which is essentially to summarizes everything I've said to date or through this presentation, but just so a few takeaways. So we're working on a number of large projects that implement the general plan, and those are not just housing or development projects, those are policy type projects. We are having some internal conversations around the second bullet point that implementation is difficult due to the size of the general plan, the number of policies, implementation measures. We are thinking about how to strategically do an update in the next couple of years, but that'll depend on sufficient funding. We are, like I said earlier, falling short on RENA progress, and we are working collaboratively with folks in the builder environment to try to make some progress there. And infill is a priority for us. We are doing some work like the Re-Envision West Arden Arcade plan and a couple of focused or targeted meetings with key developers in some of the commercial corridors. And then finally, this work program that I just went over in the previous slide, that's going to be used to determine our priorities through the next year. Hopefully we can get some of these accomplished. And with that, I don't have anything else, and I'll turn it back to the commissioners for any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, if you have a question, please let me know via chat so I can call on you. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone from the public that wants to speak on this?
We did not receive any public comment on this item.
Okay. Thank you very much. So commissioners, discussion or motion?
I believe this was a receive and file only item.
Okay. All right.
Yes, that is correct. This is a receive and file item. Sorry, this is Todd Smith again. Just so you all know, due to the state deadline of April 1st, we have already submitted this, our annual report to the state to achieve compliance with the legal mandate, but we felt like we should go ahead and present this to you after the fact anyway.
And will this be going to the Board of Supervisors as well?
Yes, we've actually done that already as well. We did it in, I think, their first meeting in April.
Okay, thank you so much.
Due to the challenges with getting this set up for the Planning Commission, we had to delay until this date.
Okay, well, good. Done. Thank you. So could we have the next presentation, please, the next item?
Item number 2, PLMP 2019-00128, Sacramento County Zoning Code 2020 Technical Updates. Environmental document is a notice of exemption.
Okay, well, as the presentation is getting brought up, this is Jessica Brandt. Good evening. I'm a senior planner with the Office of Planning and Environmental Review. And Chair Polly, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very well, and I'm starting to see the screen. It's not quite ready. It's not quite ready, but they're getting it up.
So as that's coming up, tonight I am providing this overview of the Sacramento County Zoning Code 2020 Technical Amendments Package. First, you can leave it here if you want, Alma. I did want to see if all of the commissioners viewed the overview video that staff had prepared, whether there was any interest in waiving the staff presentation tonight. The presentation I prepared for tonight is streamlined. It's not a half an hour of me talking, but I did want to put that offer out.
So I did view the video. I thought it was comprehensive, and I don't have additional questions, but I will ask the other commissioners for their perspective.
I'm good. This is Commissioner Martinson.
Okay, all right. I think we're fine with the very nicely done video.
Okay.
I'm good also. This is Commissioner Hom.
Okay, does this require a motion or is this informational only?
No, there will be a motion at the end of this. I think, Alma, if you could skip then to slide, I believe it's slide 14. And I don't know if anyone did want to have any further discussion on any of the topics in the package. I'm happy to do that here.
I'm not seeing any requests in our chat, so I'm assuming we're all good.
Okay. So then I'll just skip right to our recommendation. The Planning and Environmental Review staff recommends that the Planning Commission make the following recommendations to the board, which is recognizing the exempt status of the amendments under the California Environmental Quality Act, and recommending approval of the proposed zoning code amendments as presented.
Okay, thank you. Do we have comments from or questions from the public?
We did not receive any public comments for this item.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have discussion or a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation. Oh. I'll second then. This is Commissioner Martinson.
Was that Commissioner Shelby that made the motion?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Could you do a roll call vote then for this, please?
Yes. Commissioner Martinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Poley?
Yes.
Commissioner Hom?
Yes.
Tatishi?
Yes.
And Shelby?
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Could we have the next item, please?
Item number 3, PLMP 2019-00182, tentative parcel map. Owner is Margaret D. Wagle, and the applicant is Claybar Engineering, Inc., located at 7266 Eagles Nest Road, Sacramento, California, 95830. Environmental doc is notice of exemption.
Hello, everyone. This is Desiree Fox presenting on project PLMP 2019-00182, confirming that everyone's able to hear me.
Yes, you're very clear. We're not seeing your slide quite yet, though.
Got it.
There it goes.
Okay,
No, I think there. Now we have the new one. Thank you.
awesome. All right, so if we can advance to slide number 2. Okay. The project site is located on the southwest corner of Eagles Nest Road and Florham Road, located in the Vineyard community. The site address for the project is 7266 Eagles Nest Road. The project request is for a tentative parcel map to subdivide one 162-acre property into 2 lots, a special development permit to reduce the required minimum lot area for proposed parcel 2, and a design review to determine compliance with the countywide design guidelines. Next slide. Going over some of the specifics for the project site. The project is zoned Ag 160 and has a required minimum 160-acre parcel size. The general plan designation for the project site is GA20. According to General Plan Policy Ag 7, a 20-acre minimum parcel size is required for all agricultural land divisions, and we'll go into detail about how that impacts the project a little later in the presentation. The project is also under a Williamson Act contract and went into agreement in 1969. However, the project before us does not propose any conflicts to the active Williamson Act contract. Next slide, please. Okay, here is the site plan for the tentative parcel map. The area outlined with the dashed lines will be proposed parcel 2 and will function as the home site parcel. The home site parcel will include a principal residence and will maintain the existing private driveway. There are also a number of existing mature trees on proposed parcel 2. The remaining area that's outside of the dashed lines will be proposed parcel 1 and will exist and continue to exist as agricultural lands. Next slide. So in detail, the project is a request for a tentative parcel map to subdivide one 162-acre parcel into 2 lots. Parcel 1 is proposed to be 160 acres and parcel 2 is proposed to be 2 acres. The project also includes a special development permit request to allow for proposed parcel 2 to deviate from the minimum lot size requirements of the Ag 160 zone and the GA20 general plan designation. It should be noted that although the project does comply with the zoning code, in that proposed parcel 2 will still have a 2-acre minimum parcel size, it is in conflict with the Ag 7 general plan policy, which requires that the proposed parcel 2 would be a minimum of 20 acres, as previously mentioned in the presentation. Therefore, according to the zoning code user guide, the Planning Commission is the decision-making authority for this project, although the project is only a 2-lot parcel map. Next slide. A few key points for the project. As previously mentioned, proposed parcel 2 will maintain the existing residence and will function as a home site parcel. And proposed parcel 1 will must convey the development rights for the larger parcel. Sorry, the applicant will have to convey development rights on the proposed larger parcel in order to preclude further residential development and conversion of agricultural lands. This requirement is listed as a condition of approval in attachment 2 of the staff report. The conveyance of the development rights will occur through a separate process, and the Board of Supervisors is the hearing body for this process. Next slide. So on September 3rd, 2019, the project was reviewed at the Vineyard CPAC. After a brief discussion, the CPAC ultimately recommended approval of the project, 6 yes, 0 no. The project was also reviewed by the Design Review Advisory Committee on September 12, 2019. The DRAC did not provide any comments to the applicant in terms of revising the configuration of the parcel map, and ultimately the DRAC recommended the Planning Commission find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. Next slide, please. Planning staff recommendations to the Planning Commission is to recognize the exempt status of the request under the applicable section of the California Environmental Quality Act, approve the tentative parcel map, approve the special development permit request, and find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines, all subject to the findings and conditions listed in attachment 2 of the staff report. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I'm available if you have any questions, and I believe Dennis Barksdale, the applicant representative, is also available if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions?
This is Commissioner Hom. I do have a question.
Okay. Is it for staff or for the applicant?
Oh, for staff.
Okay, thank you.
Continue.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Desiree. Question regarding parcel 1. Site access, since these are going to be separated in 2 separate ownerships per se, how does one get access now to parcel 1? Because there's no indication of off the public right-of-way, any driveways or anything like that. And because I assume how agricultural equipment currently gets onto parcel 1 is through any drive access on parcel 2 right now. So is that something that will be handled by Public Works later, or does that need to be addressed now?
Hi, this is Desiree. There was no additional private drive requested with the parcel map, and maybe the applicant representative could speak to how parcel 1 is going to receive access. But as of right now, the parcel map did not include an additional access point via private drive. That wasn't a part of our review process.
Will Public Works have an issue with no public access, no access from the public right-of-way for parcel 1? That's a question for county staff.
So Commissioner Hom, this is Chris Pahuli. Just to interject, I think as part of Desiree's presentation, she mentioned that the proposed parcel 1 and proposed parcel 2 will continue to be owned by the property owner. Proposed parcel 1 will continue agricultural uses. It's not intended to have the property function any differently than it currently does, and therefore there's no need for additional access to the property. The applicant's representative can speak to this in a little bit more detail, but because these types of parcel splits where it's for a primary residence and separating it from the larger agricultural use, and with the conveyance of the development rights, these types of requests are treated a little bit differently than a lot split where it's intended to develop both of those parcels.
Oh, okay, if that's the case, because as a separation of creation of 2 separate parcels, even though it's currently will be owned by the same ownership, hence no issue about getting access to parcel 1. It could sell off, parcel 1 could sell off, or parcel 2 could sell off to somebody different. And then if you don't have some sort of right of access agreement attached with the land use, then it could be a problem. Not that it will be, but it could be. Correct?
I don't believe that it to be a problem, as Desiree mentioned during her presentation. A subsequent action and a condition of approval for this project will be that they need to go to the Board of Supervisors to request a conveyance of development right for proposed parcel 1, and so the conveyance of development rights will address the ability to further develop the site.
And I might make a suggestion that and have it address right of access to parcel 1.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional questions from the commissioners for staff?
This is Kara. I had just one question for staff. If the 160-acre parcel is under Williamson Act contract, which relegates it to be agricultural land in exchange for a property tax reduction, what's the purpose of the conveyance of development rights?
Hi,
this is your contract, I believe.
Hi, this is Desiree again. The purpose of the conveyance of development rights is to prevent the development of additional principal residences, as the home site parcel is already going to take up the allowed density for Ag 160, for a property in the Ag 160 zone. So currently the existing residence is on a parcel that's 162 acres, and they have the zoning requirement to be 160 acre minimum density. Sorry, 1 residence per 160 acres. So right now they meet the density requirement, but after this subdivision, proposed parcel 1, if they were to develop an additional residence, would exceed the allowed density for a property in that zone. So the conveyance of development rights is specifically for the development of additional principal residences.
Okay, because it's compatible use within Williamson Act contract to have a principal residence. So I'm assuming it's just so that they can't develop 1 extra principal residence.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Thank you very much. Does the applicant want to be heard? Are there questions for the applicant? Okay, did we have any public comment on this?
The clerk's office did not receive any public comment on item number 3.
Okay, so I will close the presentations and ask the commissioners if they have discussion or a motion.
This is Commissioner Hom. I'll make a motion to accept staff recommendations.
This is Kara.
With a note to the Board of Supervisors to address the right of access.
Commissioner Martinson, is it still your intention to second as the motion has now been described?
Yes.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Martinson?
Yes.
Poley?
Yes.
Hom?
Yes.
Tatishi?
Yes.
Shelby?
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous vote.
Thank
and
you.
The motion passed.
Good. Could we have the next item, please?
Item number 4, PLMP 2017-00270, use permit amendment, Owners Gary Silva Sr., located at 13955 Twin Cities Road in the Southeast Community, and the applicant is Snagro West, LLC. Environmental doc is prior negative declaration.
Thank you. This is Leanne Mueller, project manager. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Leanne, thank you. We hear you well.
Thank you. As stated, can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you. The item before the Planning Commission tonight is a use permit amendment, PLMP 2017-270, to extend the expiration date of an existing use permit to allow the application of biosolids to continue on approximately 3,300 acres. This is permitted as a use which is not otherwise allowed in the agricultural zones pursuant to Zoning Code Section 3.2.4a. The project site consists of numerous parcels that are located off of Twin Cities Road in the southeast community. On your slide on the left, you can see an aerial photo in which the subject parcels are indicated with the red hashes. Next slide, please. As stated, this is an extension of the expiration date of a use permit that was permitted in 2004 to allow the existing use to continue on these subject properties. Zoning Code Section 3.2.4a does allow the planning director to determine that a use that is not otherwise listed in the zoning code is substantially similar to uses or is considered an appropriate use within that zoning district. As was detailed in your staff report, this determination was made when processing the previous use permits on the site, and it continues to carry through with this use permit. The Board of Supervisors is the final hearing authority on this item, so the Planning Commission is making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors tonight. Currently, Class B biosolids from 26 facilities within Northern California are applied to the project site. I would like to note that further in the presentation, there will be some slides which detail some of the definitions and the regulatory authority associated with the permitting of this type of facility. Again, no new properties or acreage is being considered under this request, and the applicant is not requesting modifications or changes to their existing operation. This use permit amendment came about as a result of wanting to continue the use and modify the expiration date in the 2004 use permit. Next slide, please. This slide goes into some of the project history. To note, the application of biosolids has been conditionally permitted on the subject property since 1995. The first permit was issued in 1995 and allowed application on approximately 1,500 acres. A second permit was approved in 1997 and allowed the application of biosolids on an additional 1,600 acres. Another use permit from June of 1997 permitted the expansion of a biosolids storage facility on the existing site as a new use permit. And then use permit 040427 was approved in 2005, and it permitted the renewal of the previous use permits, which sunsetted in 2005. And it did combine them into basically one use permit, and it expired on December 31st of 2017. And just to note that because this use permit amendment request was submitted prior to the expiration date, the use was allowed to continue under the existing conditions of approval from that 2004 use permit, and approval of this request, this current use permit amendment, would extend the existing use permits. In February of 2019, the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board adopted revised waste discharge requirements for the application of biosolids to the subject properties. Next slide, please. Thank you. This would provide some definitions of what we are dealing with as far as biosolids. So biosolids are the solid, semi-solid, or liquid residue of materials removed from sewage during the treatment process. So essentially, these are highly treated sewage waste that is then broken down into organic matter. Biosolids are essentially graded into two classifications under federal regulations. There's Class A, which has met certain pathogen reduction requirements, and they are generally considered virtually pathogen-free, and the definition does provide for you some of the methods in which that occurs. Class B has met pathogen reduction requirements to significantly reduce the pathogens, and again, the definition does provide you with some of the methods that occurs, and these definitions and requirements do come from the federal regulations. I would like to note that Sinagro does apply both Class A and Class B biosolids to the site. Next slide, please. As I've kind of mentioned, the application of biosolids on this property is governed by federal, state, and local regulations and permitting processes. For example, 40 CFR 503 are the federal regulations governing biosolids, and it has certain requirements in it that the applicant is required to meet. For example, there are ceiling concentration limits and cumulative loading rates for certain pollutants, and if those biosolids don't meet those concentrations, they can't be land applied, and that is basically tested for and determined at the processing facility. These regulations also establish the maximum amount of each pollution concentration that can be applied to the site during the lifetime of the permitting process, and monitoring and reporting is required through the waste discharge requirements that are issued by the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. Then there is the state General Order 2004-12, and it provided a regulatory framework for biosolids application that can be used by each Regional Water Quality Control Board for potential dischargers. And then we should note, and I did reference this in a previous slide, that the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board did adopt waste discharge requirements that are specific to Sinagro and Silver Ranch, and they have specific requirements for the discharge of biosolids onto the Silver Ranch site, and associated with that is a monitoring and reporting program which does prescribe the requirements for monitoring biosolids and their land application. And then of course there is the county use permits which provide conditions of approval that the applicant also operates under. Next slide, please. So this project has had neighborhood concerns and opposition. at the CPAC meetings or through personal communication with staff, there were some concerns that were raised. We should note that there is an extensive discussion in your staff report of these concerns and how they were evaluated. But I would like to note that conditions of approval were either updated or added to address the concerns that were brought up. Odor was one. This was raised by property owners at the CPAC meetings and then through direct correspondence with staff during the processing of this application. Water quality, the CPAC and the neighbors did express concerns about surface water and then groundwater testing and monitoring of the site. Dust was raised as a concern, specifically about the material becoming airborne during windy conditions. Tracking of the material, the CPAC members did bring up concerns about tracking material onto the county roadways from project fields. Worker health was brought up at the CPAC, specifically related to on-site worker health and the provision of sanitary facilities. Next slide, please. So as far as the proposed conditions of approval, there are changes to them, as I have mentioned. They are for consistency purposes with the adopted WDRs and to address the concerns that were raised by the surrounding residences or things that per staff did notice during site visits. One of the items was whether or not who would continue to do site inspections. This will continue to be the Environmental Management Department. They do go out on a monthly basis and inspect the application of biosolids during the time period of the year in which they're being incorporated into the site. While this wasn't specifically brought up by the neighbors, staff did work with the applicant to address the overall amount of material that can be spread on the site. And basically it is recommended to be reduced from the amount in the current use permit to a slightly less amount, which is based on current operations. There are some increased setbacks based on comparing to other jurisdictions' ordinances and in some cases to match the WDRs. So for example, there's an increased distance of application from surface water, which matches the WDRs, and there's an increase in the application distances from off-site residences and roadways. We have also taken to asking them through a condition of approval for fields that are adjacent to public roads and off-site buildings that biosolids be incorporated within 6 hours. To work to control dust, we are asking that it's actually a condition that no land spreading or incorporating of biosolids occur if the wind speed exceeds 25 miles per hour. The applicant will be required to provide a toilet and hand washing sink to application personnel. Their air track out prevention is included as condition of approval number 48. So at main entrances and exits, there will be physical track out prevention, and then it will also be supplemented with a street sweeper. The depth of tilling in for the material and a monitoring protocol, it has been initiated as recommended condition of approval 50. It is intended again to keep the material from becoming airborne and becoming dust. And groundwater monitoring was added as condition of approval number 51. Historically, the county and the WDRs did not require groundwater monitoring, but the applicant has agreed to monitor 2 on-site wells within a year of the approval of the use permit. Next slide, please. So this project did go to the Agricultural Advisory Committee on November of 2019. There weren't any comments received, and the Agricultural Advisory Committee did vote to recommend approval of the project to the board with the changes of approval that were recommended by staff. Next slide, please. The Southeast CPAC heard this project both as a workshop item in May of 2018, and they did have numerous concerns that were raised. As a result of that, the applicant did provide additional information to staff, which we evaluated, and that is provided to both the CPAC and the Planning Commission as attachment 6 to your staff report. The CPAC did formally hear the item on September 27th of 2019. 2 members of the public did speak in opposition to the project, and at the end of the discussion, the CPAC did recommend to vote approval of the project by a 3-to-1 vote with 1 member absent. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I would like to note that because nothing has changed from the project, that staff is recognizing that the previously adopted environmental document is still adequate, and that there aren't any new environmental documents or changes to that existing environmental document that were required. So with that, staff is requesting that the Planning Commission recommend to the board that they recognize the previously adopted environmental document and negative declaration are still adequate and complete, that they recognize the previously adopted mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and that they approve the amendment to the use permit subject to the findings and conditions that are included in attachment 2 of the staff report. Thank you very much. This concludes staff's presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Okay. Does the applicant want to speak on this? Okay, so we'll close the presentation. Commissioners, do you want to discuss this, or does anyone have a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation. This is Kara.
Second, Commissioner Satishi.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Martinson?
Yes.
Holy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Satishi?
Yes.
Shelby? Shelby?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelby?
Did you hear me? I said yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. And it's a unanimous vote. The motion passes with all members voting yes.
Thank you very much. Could we have the next item, please?
All right. Item number 5 is PLMP 2018-00313, use permit, special development permit, and design review. Owner is Guggenheim Development Services. Applicant is Tate and Associates, located at 9396 Greenback Lane at the southwest corner of Greenback Lane and Main Avenue. And the environmental document is a negative declaration.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Meredith Holsworth. I'm the project manager for the Orangevale 7-Eleven project. You can go ahead to the next slide. The project site is located at 9396 Greenback Lane. It's on the southwest corner of Greenback and Main in the Orangevale community. The subject parcel is located within the Greenback Lane special planning area, and it's currently developed with a vacant building that was a wild sports store that will be demolished for the proposed project. Next slide, please. The request before you is for a use permit that would allow the use of a 24-hour service station that's within 500 feet of residential zoning. It would allow for the roof of the canopy structure to reach a height of 5 feet 11 inches. That's from the bottom of the bottom of the canopy to the rooftop. The request also includes a special development permit to allow an increase in the amount of signage on site. To allow it to be 155 feet instead of the development standard of 125 square feet. That special development permit includes a request to allow 2 monument signs on one parcel, and finally to allow 69 linear feet of street frontage to deviate from the streetscape cross-section within the SPA guidelines. Finally, the request includes a design review to comply with the countywide design guidelines. Next slide. I'm not seeing the next slide yet. Should be the site plan.
I have it on my screen.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and describe it to you. Maybe it'll come up for me.
We can see number 4. Is that what you're looking at? Page 4?
So this is Chris Bahuli. It sounds like we may have lost Meredith. Meredith, are you still there? It doesn't sound like she's... Yeah. So perhaps I'll just kind of pick up, and if she rejoins, then we can add her back in. But so this is the slide 4 is the site plan. It shows the convenience store on the eastern portion of the property and the canopy structure on the western side of the property. The site will be accessed by 2 driveways, one from Greenback and the other from Main. Next slide, please.
Meredith is back, Chris.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Of course, I had no network problems until I'm presenting.
So we've moved on. We've moved on from the site plan, and now I presented that slide, and now we're on the landscape plan, Meredith.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So slide 5 is the landscaping plan. This plan is depicting the new trees and the landscaping that will be included in the development. There's no landscaping out there right now, so this will be certainly an improvement from that standpoint. And there are, as you can kind of see on this slide, it shows the 2 monument signs that will be each located right next to those proposed driveway access points. If you can go to the next slide. This is the proposed elevation for the new building. It also shows the building signage, and you can see the 2 monument signs that are proposed and the design of those. And those signs, as well as the canopy signage and the gas pump signage, are all included in the calculation for that special development permit signage deviation. Go ahead to the next slide. So the final hearing body will be the board, so today's vote will be a recommendation to them. The proposed service station has 6 gas pumps proposed. That'll be a total of 12 fuel island stations under the canopy. There has been an application submitted for a finding of public convenience and necessity, or PCN. That's been submitted for beer and wine sales at the convenience store location, and that will be heard at the board concurrently with this use permit application. Next slide. I'm not seeing the next slide yet, but I'll go ahead and describe it. Slide 8 states that the DRAC reviewed the project on June 27th of 2019 and found the project to be in compliance with countywide design guidelines. The Orangevale CPAC voted to recommend approval by a 5-2 vote. That meeting was on August 6, 2019. There were quite a few members of the community at that meeting that were in opposition to the project, and their comments at the CPAC meeting are summarized in the staff report, and any letters in opposition that we've received are included as an attachment to the staff report. Next slide, please. Slide 9 summarizes the recommendations that will be going to the Board of Supervisors for their final hearing decision. They are as follows: to determine that the environmental analysis is complete and adopt the negative declaration, to approve the use permit and the special development permit subject to findings and conditions in attachment 2 attached to the staff report, and to find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. And that does conclude staff's presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and we have the applicant on the line for questions as well. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have questions? Does anyone have a question for staff?
This is Commissioner Hom. I have a couple of questions for Meredith.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Meredith. Good evening. One of the questions I had in the exterior elevations of the building, it looks like on the north and east elevation of the building, they had glass. But on the floor plan, it depicts it as no vision glass. Can you make a clarification if there's really any vision glass on the north and east elevations?
Good evening, Commissioner. If you don't mind, I'd like to give that question to the applicant team, if that's all right.
Okay, that's fine. And then, do you want me to save that for later, or?
No, please go ahead with any questions that you have for Meredith, and then we'll ask the applicant up.
And then Meredith, since much of the opposition appears to revolve around alcohol sales, can you let us know what are the requirements for that? Because it was unclear in the staff report on any restrictions on the alcohol sales, as well as the healthy foods guideline.
Absolutely. So this use permit before you is strictly for the use of the service station within, to have the extended hours within 500 feet of the residential zoning. And though we know that there is alcohol or beer and wine sales associated with this convenience store, those conditions and specific discussion of the alcohol sales will be a part of the public convenience and necessity application. So this use permit doesn't actually speak to their ability to sell the beer and wine, but it will be included in the PCN discussion, and that's where all of the conditions related to alcohol sales will be attached to. So they are going through the process of the PCN, and then hand in hand with that, they're going through their process to get their ABC license as well. So that is a separate application and will be heard concurrently with this application at the board, but the alcohol sales just aren't addressed in this portion of the project.
But this application is asking for recommendations on the 24-hour operations of the facility, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Meredith? Okay, could we ask the applicant to come up and make sure you've been sworn in?
Good afternoon. I'm Jesse Kent with Guggenheim. Is my volume okay?
Yes, we hear you clearly.
I'm Jesse Kent, Director of Development and Construction for Guggenheim Development Services. I have been sworn. If you don't mind, I'd like to have a few statements just to kind of give you a little bit of background. And as this is going on about a 2-year process, a lot of thank yous to add to the list. I'd like to thank, first of all, the Planning Commission for holding this meeting online. I know it's challenging, and I apologize that Meredith had issues tonight. That's just part of how these things go. But it truly reflects that Sacramento County is open for business. And I think that's a testament to you folks and gives us hope on our end. I'd also like to thank county staff, in particular Meredith Holsworth and Leanne Mueller, who both assisted with public meetings. There have been a few, processing of applications and exhibits, and of course the final staff report. I think it's worth noting that our team would be remiss if we didn't mention the patience and support of the sellers. Again, it's a long time period. There's reasons for that length of time, but obviously it's a commitment on the seller's standpoint to be in contract with us for this extension of time. And getting to know them through the process, we certainly understand that Wild Sports was a community mainstay for many years, and I've enjoyed hearing a lot of the stories of how Orangeville was part of Wild Sports and vice versa. Guggenheim and 7-Eleven are excited to propose this development on this particular corner. It's a prominent corner, very visible, and a big part of the Orangeville neighborhood. But we believe that we have here a viable, dynamic business that will serve the neighborhood community for the next generation. And I think that's so important in the times that we're going through. Also, as we get to the details of, in particular, like what the commissioner asked about as far as windows, I think it's worth noting that there's been a significant evolution in this project from its first inception. And I think that's a testament to the county's meeting process. There are a lot of public meetings. I've mentioned the length of time, but I think they are helpful. I think certainly feedback is available. I think we have responded to it positively, and I think we have a much better project by way of architectural design, site layout, safety concerns, pedestrian access, and site landscaping as part of that overall process. I think it's also worth noting that typically, we get a lot of questions, and certainly we'll get at Board of Supervisors as far as the operation of the store and how that's going to happen. Typically, a franchisee is selected for the 7-Eleven store about 90 days before store opening. And if we were to get through the remaining approvals left, we're approximating that to be July of next year. But it's been a real testament, again, to work with 7-Eleven from the standpoint that real estate and operational representatives have met locally with folks, including the Orangeville Chamber. We've attended almost every meeting, maybe every meeting that has to do with the future PBID that they would like to establish for Orangeville and the Greenback Lane corridor. And everyone on this side of the table is certainly in favor of that. I think also it's worth noting, just in the general concept of there were a lot of conditions. There's a lot of paperwork associated with that that's found in the staff report. We have agreed to all conditions. We had one issue that came out of the local ABC Sacramento office that was a misprint, and that has been corrected and inserted with the approval of ABC, and Meredith has it in her files. I don't know if she had time to get it to everybody, but there was some wording that had to do with the selling of wine, 750 milliliters. That's a normal size bottle. And the language said that you may not sell at 750, and it meant to say you may not sell at anything less than 750. We went through that process between late last week and this meeting here, and again, that's about the only amendment, I know of that was made to the entire conditions of approval. The commissioner asked about exterior elevations, and if you have the elevations in front of you, I apologize not having access to the slide deck, exactly what page that is. But let's start with where we do have visible glass at. That would be the west elevation, which of course is the main storefront elevation that faces out towards the gas canopy. Certainly that's of importance as people fuel up. You also notice that we have visualized on that slide 2 exterior security cameras. That is a typical 7-Eleven fueling package. We have, after CPAC comments and discussion with staff, if you look at the east elevation, you'll see that the front corner entrance, that is see-through glass as well. That would leave the north elevation and the long expanse along the east elevation to be inset spandrel, but we've added additional cameras to that side of the building in order to make up for that quote-unquote blind spot. The challenge with ever doing a convenience store is to, obviously, you've got some back room area that remains not lit because of safety concerns, things of that nature, and you typically always have a cooler vault, which again creates issues with trying to get lighting through. So we found that this design here, especially the pedestrian activated corner, gives that ability to look through the store and have a much better handle on crime prevention through environmental design issues.
May I ask you this is Commissioner Hahn, may I ask you a question?
Of course.
If, to the extent possible, because looking at your floor plan, the fixturization of the store isn't illustrated. To the extent possible, if you could replace some of the spandrel glass with vision glass on the north and east elevation, I'm going to leave it to as you develop your fixturization plan. I'm a big advocate having eyes on the public right-of-way. I applaud you on activating the corner for a connection to the street intersection, but a little bit more expanse would be, I think, beneficial because you have quite a bit of landscape area between the public right-of-way and the face of the building. And one of the comments that appears from the neighborhood is people hanging out, loitering, and security issues. Security cameras are great, but anytime you have eyes on the space, it hopefully deters people from behaving badly.
Yeah, certainly that is a comment that we hear. We have heard as we work through this. It really was the implementation of creating that corner divide there for access to the corner. The challenges again in this particular area with floor plan, and Commissioner, I'm happy to post meeting to email you over the equipment floor layout if you do not have that in your possession. But both of those walls contain both equipment and piping plans that create, at the very least, you would have almost 8 feet high solid wall area, where at that point it would be strictly ambient glass at that area. Unfortunately, at this point, we really have reduced the footprint just about as far as we can go from the standpoint of creating an experience for the customer that enables them to know they're going to get what they're looking for when they come into the store. But your point is well taken.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. I'll close the presentation portion of this meeting and ask the commissioners if you have discussion or motions.
I don't have any discussion, but I'm happy to move the item. Staff's recommendation. This is Kara.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Hom. I'll make the second.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Martinson?
Yes.
Foley?
Yes.
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 Fatishi?
Yes.
And Shelby?
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you. Okay, so could we have the planning director's report, please?
Yeah, this is Chris Bahuli. So I'll just provide a couple of updates about how things are going here. It sounds like I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, we're getting some echo. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's echo on your end too.
Yeah, I'm going to mute myself while you're speaking and see if that helps.
Okay. Seems like there's still an echo, but I will move forward if it's not too much of an inconvenience. Just a few items. Wanted to mention that the county planning staff are all working remotely. Just a quick update on that. We have taken a number of measures to ensure that that work is still being done, that the planning department is still moving forward with processing work while everyone is working remotely. We've just recently set up a electronic submittal for new applications and an online payment portal as well that just recently went through. Just checking that everyone can hear me, right? I just gotta.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Yes, and
Okay.
the echo's gone.
Okay, I just got an email from a couple of people or a text message. Just want to make sure folks can hear me. So again, yes, we did just recently start taking applications electronically and an online payment portal. So that is all working well, and applications are continuing to come in, which is a really good sign. In addition to that, we've also been holding hearings just like this one. We had our first zoning administrator and subdivision review committee hearings last week and the week before. So those have all been moving forward as well. And working out some technical kinks, but they've all been able to happen. And at least for the time being, we're going to continue to hold public hearings remotely. And then last, wanted to mention that we are continuing to work with the Clerk of the Board's office in planning for and conducting CPAC meetings remotely. Those are a little bit more challenging than some of our other hearings, but we are prioritizing projects and determining how best to conduct CPAC meetings remotely for the time being, and looking forward to having at least the first one, which is the Fair Oaks CPAC, and that is scheduled for next week. So we're cautiously optimistic that those meetings are going to work well remotely, and that folks will have the opportunity to provide comment and recommendations on projects. So those were the updates that I wanted to provide you, and I can answer questions if commissioners have any.
Well, congratulations. I think that's wonderful news about being able to go online for applications and for payments. And I personally want to thank you all for continuing to work during the shutdown. I know there must be people worried about being out and about, but when things do free up, we certainly want the ability for people to get their projects started and get people back to work. Thank you. Do we have any scheduling matters?
We do not.
Okay. And do we have anyone from the public that's indicated they wanted to use this time?
No, I did want to note that we did receive one public comment for item number 5. However, I believe it was from the legal counsel for the applicant.
Yes. Is that the one that you had forwarded to us? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, we saw that. Good. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll end the meeting at 7:03.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be safe, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.